On this episode of AV Week, InfoComm has updated an audio standard. We'll talk about the most interesting vertical markets available and what is an analytic company doing at the InfoComm show. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 298, recorded Friday, May 12th, 2017. Vice Verticals. Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by Draper. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about that very thing, first and foremost, my buddy pal, and got to see him a couple weeks ago over in New Jersey and in Maryland area. His name is George Fournier. He works for a company called FSR. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Long time no see.
No kidding. Just a couple weeks. Up next is the gentleman who travels, the only person on this panel who travels more than I do. His name is Ken Eagle. He works for Atlona, and he did a fabulous European tour here recently. So how are you, sir?
Wonderful, Tim. Thank you.
Welcome back to the States.
Happy to be here.
Happy they let you back in, you know.
It was touch and go for a little bit.
I know. It's crazy. And also, last but not least, Mr. Craig McCormick, purveyor of all things illicit and vice in the corners of AV. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. We joke with Mr. McCormick because his is the first stories we're going to talk about. I said stories as in plural. So here's the thing, and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I want to say that you released the first story of the cannabis dispensaries on April 20th. Is that the first of the three?
That was the second, but we did post it on April 20th, and that was no coincidence.
On
exactly,
420.
That was no coincidence. Yep.
So here's the thing: Craig's done three. It's kind of tongue in cheek here. Three. We'll call them vice verticals, right? And if I just coined a phrase, y'all are free to use it.
Sure.
The three verticals you talked about specifically. One was strip clubs, adult entertainment, gentlemen's clubs. Although I don't know in this 2017 if I should call them gentlemen's clubs, but you all get where I'm going with this, right? It's places where people take their clothes off. The second one was cannabis dispensaries, and the last one here was prisons. And these are verticals where you've interviewed folks, you have not gone to these places. Let me be clear about this, but you've interviewed the integrators about the market, right? And this is a market, especially in states where talking about cannabis dispensaries where this has become legal or not criminalized depending on your state. First of all, what led you down this road? And second, what is the most interesting thing that you found in these verticals?
Well, the story on the strip clubs has actually been one that we've been talking about trying to do for quite a while. But basically, since I started working at Commercial Integrator, it's been one that we've been kind of joking about, it'd be great to do a story about AV and strip clubs. And we, couldn't really figure out a way to do it without it just being, laughed off and made fun of and stuff like that. I had made a connection with another integrator who did a lot of work in these cannabis dispensaries, especially in Colorado, when that got legalized a few years ago. And the prison one kind of came to us. So we figured it would be kind of a good collection of three, unique vertical markets where there's a lot of money to be made, and maybe not a lot of integrators know too much about it, but we were able to find experts in each of those verticals that have made some inroads and kind of know what they're doing in those particular verticals. It's kind of been a pretty funny series to put together, and just found some interesting. The integrator who did the work in the strip clubs also works in churches, so I thought that was funny. That they have those kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum. The one for the marijuana dispensaries, the first time they did work in that space, the deposit came in cash because the shop was not allowed to have its own bank account because it's still technically federally illegal.
Yep.
And the prison one basically said that as many stories as you hear about in prisons where the inmates will give people a hard time if they come in and stuff. They said they leave those guys alone because basically it's like they're fixing their house pretty much. That's the way the guy kind of described it. If they're coming in to put in a new security system, it's basically upgrading their home. So it's just kind of an interesting couple of stories.
That one there especially was interesting to me because you're right. They mentioned the fact that it feels like almost residential, right? where you're fixing someone's home. So, Ken, we'll start. The next question in kind of off this here is what's the most interesting vertical that you've ever kind of encountered that piqued your interest enough to where you're like, you know what, other integrators might want to consider this?
I got to say, one of the most interesting, exciting verticals, and this really comes in the very high-end residential space because it's so interesting. There's two things there. One is yachts. So yachts are just that's a lot of fun. And it's always there's always a competition for who has the biggest yacht on the water and who can put the most in it. And then when that gets outdone, you got another job because that guy wants to be back on top again with the biggest shot with the most exciting thing. So, hey, look, if you get money to spend, that's always a lot of fun and an interesting place to work at. The other is in the city, in high rise, in big high rises, skyscrapers.
Yeah.
To me, that's just cool. I mean, there's a challenge there. There's commercial and residential involved in that, and just the environment's really cool. There's new AV challenges. There's new products that are going to get invented to work around some of those challenges. And it's just an exciting place to be.
Speaking of yachts, real quick, I remember my first few programming classes in different places, ran into a guy who did marine, who did yachts, and he did a couple. What were some of the biggest challenges you guys ran into, or the integrator you were working with ran into in those yachts?
So yachts are interesting because you've got limited places to install and to run cable. Very different than working in any kind of a structure like a building or a home. So the biggest challenge is figuring out how you can get the cable you need where you need it to go. You've also got challenges of availability. These things move around, so you've got to be available to do it when it's there and dock. So definitely some challenges. And one challenge in particular, one of the guys that we worked with on an installation had a terrible case of motion sickness, which was interesting. Sitting in a boat that's moving around all day and not thinking about it. Get your sea legs ready.
Oh, wow. All right. Mr. Fournier, from your guys' perspective, working with integrators, what's the most, or in your previous existence before you worked for FSR, what's some of the most interesting verticals you've run into that other integrators should know about?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a bunch of different applications. I mean, we have such a varied product line that it's really unique applications that come up all the time for a lot of, especially for our metal products. We always have somebody at a show. In fact, the last two shows when we were around the Simco showcase, I had two different customers come up and say, "You're never going to guess where we use some of your boxes." We found out that we do a lot of floor boxes and table boxes in the courtrooms, and we actually found out that an integrator was using the boxes with the U.S. Marshal Service. They were putting the boxes into the tables for like the defendant and for the prosecutors, but then under the defendant's table, they would actually put another box that had a ring welded into it for them to attach the restraints because you can't have the person invisible restraints in front of a jury because it may prejudice the jury. So they would actually run their restraints through their suit, and then when they sat down before the jury came in, they would actually lock them into this restraint under the table that was actually in one of our boxes.
Wow.
So it was a quite completely different way of looking at it.
So on the other end of the spectrum of Craig's prison story, or I guess the precursor to Craig's.
We went full circle on
Yeah,
there.
full circle there.
There you go.
And he probably got busted for having an ounce of pot, and that's,
You never know.
Anyhow.
Just quickly before we move off this, I know obviously we're having a lot of fun with kind of these different verticals and kind of the uniqueness of them, but I did a blog specifically on the marijuana dispensaries, and there was a statistic that in that market in the next decade that'd be spent about $50 billion.
Yep.
And obviously, there's money to be made there. It's not all AV money, obviously, but obviously that's a market that's growing. So that there's opportunities, and obviously more and more states every year are legalizing it. So there's more and more places where integrators can do it. So
He said growing.
Well, he did, and here's
Exactly.
the thing. So you've got real quickly. I want to get off this by the time we get a few minutes here, but
Yep.
you've got the state of Colorado, who has already legalized it. You've got Oregon, who's also decriminalized, and I'm trying to, let's just say, legalized it, and we can differ about exactly how they did that. I live in the state of Illinois. I live in Southwest Illinois. I tell people St. Louis, but legally, my address is Illinois. They're looking at legalizing it for recreational use as well. So he's not wrong when it comes to, I don't know how many of the 50 states are going to start making it non-illegal, let's put it that way, for people to consume marijuana. Those folks need all sorts of things, whether it's security systems or it's, honestly, digital signage.
Right.
Menu boards. Let's be frank about this. This is a consumable, so I can definitely see digital signage and menu boards, and it's a really, really good market. And I have a good friend who also did an adult entertainment venue as well here locally. So it's a very good system. I want to say he did Meyer Sound in it. So anyhow. All right, next story. We're going to talk about a couple of things with InfoComm here, as we are about 4 weeks away as we sit here and record this on May 12th. Not to freak out the three gentlemen here, all three of which have booths to cover. One I want to talk about, I mentioned digital signage a second ago. AdMobilize. AdMobilize is a crowd analytic company. They're going to have a booth, and I'll put the link up here. We're using AV Network's story on this one. But they, quote unquote, according to the story, AdMobilize's audience measurement, vehicle analytics, and crowd analytics solutions are being adopted by leading B2B and B2C brand marketers around the world. It's an analytic company. Ken, I want to start with you on this one. I guess the best way to ask this is, what is an analytic company doing at a commercial audio video trade show?
Well, analytics isn't new. It's been around forever, right? You especially in the consumer marketplace, you want to sell, you've got to measure analytics. And throughout history, if you look back, this happens every so many years. A new technology comes out, and we find new ways to use analytics to measure something and try and apply it to sales. This is the next evolution in that. The article is interesting. I like their method. I like the tools. I think it's a very cool idea. Capturing and measuring crowds, what they're doing, what they're interested in. This is allowing retailers to target the shopper exactly and to figure out, how do I get that guy's dollars? What's the best way to do it? And it's using technology. Maybe this is the most technology that's been used in the history of analytics. I don't know the answer to that. But this is a technology show, so that's probably why it's here. The question is, will the right audience be here to look at that analytic tool? I don't know. We got a lot of integrators coming into a show like this. It's a good pitch. I mean, integrator. Do I have a new customer now? Is it a marketing company? Is it consumer base? Can I sell them an analytics tool? Maybe I'm not just an AV integrator. Maybe I'm an AV integrator helping with technology and marketing for your company. So, I kind of like it. I think it's exciting. I think it keeps our industry moving, and maybe it's bringing some new ideas in.
Mm-hmm. Craig, from your standpoint, looking at, I mentioned digital signage is something that we've also gotten into, you guys as well. What is an analytic company doing at InfoComm?
I actually wouldn't be surprised if InfoComm themselves will, make use of the stats that ad mobilizes, it will find at InfoComm on the show floor, and maybe help them with, future events, whether it's, ISE or, another overseas show, or maybe this show next year. I wouldn't be surprised if that's, part of the goal of having them included here, is, just getting information that can help them, put together a better show next year in Las Vegas.
That's a good point. George, as the years have gone on, like I mentioned before, that you work for FSR now, but you've worked at a couple of other places as well before you hit there.
Mhm.
How has analytics changed? And Ken's not wrong in this. Analytics is not new.
Right.
How has that kind of adapted to the AV industry over the years?
It's a tool that a lot of people didn't know really existed, because we've touched on it so far, is about the difference between, when we look at analytics, we think of it from a marketing side, and marketing people always want eyes on stuff. In a previous life, I worked for a company that did, the easiest way to say it is AV for retail.
Okay.
We were one of the largest cool sign integrators in the world. At one point, we actually owned cool sign when Planar was getting rid of them. So so we've had been working with analytics, digital analytics, way back when. But it was basically, when you put up a sign with a camera on it, you actually had to put a box around on the ground, and people had to stand within that box for you to see if they were actually looking at whatever content you were showing on the display.
Okay.
This new stuff that they're showing, where they're taking views and conducting analytics in Grand Central Station, is light years ahead of what we did originally. And a lot of the customers that we dealt with, we did the signs that you see in the malls. So they're out in front of a store, and they're selling content on that stuff, saying, hey, we're going to get you this many impressions, we're going to get you this many eyes on your products. And they can now actually generate that information and turn around and say, hey, here it is. Here's the proof. Here's what we do for so-and-so. Here's what we do for these other companies. So as the AV guys are starting to expand on their digital signage offerings, and also the content, this is key. This gives that extra as a service type of solution. So it's not just, you can almost give away the displays with the technology in it, because now you're going to provide all this information, and you can help them customize their content and what they're going to present on there.
Well, it also gets folks beyond the selling the box, right? And that's
Right.
not, I mean, good Lord, people smarter than me have been writing about that and talking about that for at least 10 years.
Right.
The ever shrinking, incredibly shrinking margin, right? And when they're talking about the sales of the box, but this gives them kind of a way around that.
Yeah, the founders of the company that I had worked for, their biggest thing in the story they always told about was that they went into a large retail house, and there was a sneaker display that had displays built into it, and they were all dark. And the guy said, well, wait a minute, why is this stuff dark? And they're like, well, we originally installed it for this rollout that we did last year, and now it changed, and so we're just not using them, so we just turned them off. And he went, okay, wait a minute. And it was just like, he had that Edison moment, the light bulb came on, and he said, wait a minute, the technology is secondary. It's the solution. We need to be providing them how to get their message across, what he used to call the wow factor. It was the how to present your wow. It doesn't matter whether it was on a specialized display, or a custom cutout, or projection, or smoke projection, or some fancy LED stuff. That was almost secondary. It was, how do we get more feet in the door, and how can we tell what's bringing them in? And it would work with their print advertising, their social media. They're at the beginning of their social media. I mean, Twitter, I think, was only like a year old at the time when they were doing this. And to be able to tie all that stuff together, the original using Bluetooth in your phones to trigger when you walked into a store, so that a particular music store knew when you walked up to their display of T-shirts and stuff that said, "Hey, Tim, welcome back. We know you like these bands. Here's all the best Village People stuff for you to take a look at." That kind of stuff.
Thank you for that, George. Appreciate that.
It was there. I couldn't resist.
It was there.
I
just
actually kind of
go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
I kind of wonder if manufacturers at InfoComm might use this sort of information, get these sort of analytics, because
you
obviously
have two manufacturers on the phone with you right now. So why don't you ask them?
Well, that's why I'm mentioning it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, obviously, that everybody likes, scanning their badge and all that stuff, or giving away prizes at the end of the week. But I wonder if these analytics might give them more complete information for people that don't get their badge scanned. That they can figure out which products they're stopping at, which ones they're walking right by, that sort of stuff. I wonder if that might be a little more helpful in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, that would be huge, because I know that there have been booths that have been near us from other manufacturers where they're hiring people that get basically paid per scan.
Yeah.
It's they stand out in the middle of the aisle, and as you walk by, they're shooting your thing. So now all of a sudden you start getting something from a company you never even stopped in their booth. So it's not really like qualified type of stuff. So actually being able to drill down and analyze who came through what sections of your booth they actually looked at, what products was key, for a manufacturer like FSR, who has such a wide gambit of different type of things that we can be presenting, to be able to turn around and say, you know what, this worked, this didn't work. And to have data to be able to throw out, to bring up, instead of just, throwing the spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. I think that would be a huge thing. At the other end of it too, is if you thought of manufacturers actually integrating this stuff into their devices. We have digital signage and display guys who are looking at, they're providing the displays with the players built into it, or with the signage stuff built into it. You can now build the analytics into it, or have that as a service that you can subscribe to through your players or your devices. I think that could be a whole huge avenue for this stuff in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you on that too, George. I mean, we spend a lot of time and money to be at those trade shows. The better results we can get back from it, the happier we're going to be. And from an InfoComm standpoint, if I'm happy with the results we get, I want to keep coming back and buying booth space, maybe bigger booth space. The trade show coordinator is going to love that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll stick on the InfoComm, but not the show part, the organization part. They released this week an update to a audio standard. The original audio, the audio standard for audio coverage uniformity. The original, though, was just about enclosed environments. This 2017 version has been expanded to cover most listener areas. George, when it comes to standards in general and InfoComm standards, and a lot of these have become ANSI certified eventually, how important are they for the industry at large, both from the manufacturer standpoint as well as from the integrators that you talk to?
That's a good question. That could be a show all on its own. I mean, we're starting to see, actually driven, you take it back a step, is actually driven from the end user side. You're seeing a lot of bid packages slowly come out, especially in the higher education field, where they're starting to say, you know what, you must be following these standards. You must be testing to these standards. You must have people who are qualified to test to these standards, and actually listing that within the bids to narrow down their selection of who's a trunk slammer versus an actual integrator that's worth their time and money. You see this tied in with the Apex program. Having these tools that are actually available and that are ANSI recognized now is really becoming a differentiator in the industry.
Okay.
And actually giving the end users, I think, more knowledge. And I think that's a carryover from the IT side too, is the IT people always had, you've got 1,000,001 different certifications and standards and everything that you have to work to. having these tools available for our guys to work with as well is I think is key.
All right, Ken, same kind of question from the manufacturing standpoint. What's how important are these standards for you guys as they come out?
Well, I think they're really important, actually, and here's my take on it. The business and the business spaces where we're integrating is changing. There's new designs out there. I see all kind of different kind of rooms. Half of these places tend to be conference spaces, huddle spaces that are all glass enclosures. This changes the way the room works. But on top of that, we've got new products like our HDVS 300 soft codec conferencing system. This is largely, you're going to find someone who wants to integrate with wireless speakers or Bluetooth devices or USB-based devices, which is great. I love it. That's a great part of our business. The challenge is now you're getting into a space of do-it-yourselfer. You do it yourself, because you can go out to consumer manufacturers that you can buy in retail chain stores and buy similar products and put them into your office at a fraction of the price that you might get from a professional integration company. So how does a professional integration company compete against that? Well, you have manufacturers who follow different standards that are put out by bodies like InfoComm, and we build products that adhere to this, and it makes our stuff different than what you might get from a consumer brand. And so I think it's good for our industry, and it helps set us apart, gives us a voice and a place, and a program to follow.
All right, Mr. McCormick, last word on this. How important are these standards, both from honestly, from an InfoComm standpoint, as well as the manufacturer standpoint, the integrators, and eventually the end users?
Well, the great thing about standards is there are so many of them.
That is true.
But I actually agree both with George and with Ken. George mentioned that that a lot of these standards are kind of driven by the IT kind of mentality, and I think that's really coming into play. The fact that these IT integrators and IT installers they want these standards, they require these standards when they're doing their work. I think that's falling into AV, and they're kind of following suit when it comes to that. And Ken's right when he's talking about it sets professional integrators apart from just buying it off the shelf yourself and putting it in. It's something that an integrator can walk in and say, well, we have this certification, we follow these standards, so our work is guaranteed to whatever the level happens to be. So I think that's a differentiator for them as well.
All right. Very good. That'll do it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Mr. Ken Eagle from Atlona, thank you, sir.
Yes, Tim, thank you very much.
How do people get a hold of you at Lona, or where can they find you if they're coming to the InfoComm show?
Yeah, so a couple of things here at lona.com. Last week we just launched a brand new amazing website. Check that out. There's a great contact page on there. All the information's there. And if you're coming by InfoComm, we are in West Hall B booth 3961.
3961. Alrighty. Mr. Fournier, thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me again, Tim.
And how do people find you and FSR and also on the show floor?
FSR is online at fsrinc.com. You can also follow them on the Twitters at FSR_Inc. And at InfoComm, we're going to be at booth 3843.
3843.
Be sure to stop by and say hi.
And get your badge scanned by both of these gentlemen.
Yeah.
Because or your Bluetooth, whatever. Mr. McCormick, how do people get a hold of you and or commercial integrator, sir?
They can commercialintegrator.com is probably the best way to find our stories. You can obviously subscribe to the magazine, either digitally or print edition, depending on your preference. You can find us on Twitter at CommIntegrator, and you can find me on Twitter at Craig McCormick. And I'll be making my way all over the InfoComm show floor, so I'll stop and say hello if I see you when I'm passing.
Yeah, I will warn you one thing about Craig's Twitter: don't follow him if you're a Yankee fan. Just want to put that out there.
Yes, please don't.
Please, I even said please don't. All right. My name is Tim Albright. At this point, don't follow me on the Twitters. I'm grousing about the Chicago Bears draft choices, but go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. We've already started our InfoComm section, so you can check that out. Press releases are coming down. We've done a couple things with that as well. You can sign up for our Tweet Up. What is a Tweet Up? It's free beer and food for about 2 hours on Wednesday. That's all you need to know. So come, you can sign up for that under our InfoComm section. Also, you can check out a number of our other shows. We do this show, but we also do a number of others. We have a brand spanking new one called the AV Profession. 10, 15 minutes of management and just business advice from the folks over at Navigate Management Consulting. We started a new show that first episode is already up this week. We're going to hopefully post a new one every 2 weeks. So also, if you would, please, while you're at the website, avnation.tv, check out our underwriters, find companies like FSR. So thank you. They help us do what we do here at AVNation. So all of that is at the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been AV Week.